The new Boost Mobile network is offering unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month for life.
That sounds like a threat.
Then how do you think we should say it?
Unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month for the rest of your life?
I don't know.
Until your ultimate demise.
What if we just say forever?
Okay.
$25 a month, forever.
Get unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month with Boost Mobile forever.
After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers will pay $25 a month as long as they remain active on the Boost Unlimited plan.
This cold and flu season, Instacart is here to help deliver all of your sick day essentials. Whether you're in prevention mode and need vitamins, hand sanitizer, and that lemon tea your Nana swears by, or you're in healing mode and need medicine, soup, and a lot more tissues. Simply download the Instacart app and get sick day supplies that reinvigorate or relieve, delivered in as fast as 30 minutes. Plus, enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Excludes restaurant orders, service fees, and terms apply.
It took a lifetime to find the person you want to marry. Finding the perfect engagement ring is a lot easier. At BlueNile.com, you can find or design the ring you've always dreamed of with help from Blue Nile's jewelry experts who are on hand 24/7 to answer questions, and the ease and convenience of shopping online. For a limited time, get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more with code LISTEN at BlueNile.com. That's $50 off with code LISTEN at BlueNile.com.
Changing Times, the Allenwood Conversations.
Sponsored by the Meadowlands Hotel in Tralee.
In the process of that period, in that early first year, I got a call from Simon Coveney to say maybe they, thinking about the possibility of another role for me, and I thought, wow.
You know, Mary, I've been thinking, well, you and I are both kind of chataholics, but a lot of our lives we do spend just in conversation, chatting to people, whether it's casual chats or very deep, meaningful conversations. I sometimes wonder, what would life be like, without those moments of connection to other people through simple chat?
I know, and as you say, no bother to either of us, Mary. Sure,
no,
not having
we have been accused of that before now, yes.
I don't know. I can't even imagine. It just gives meaning to the day, to life, to interaction with people. We would be lost without them. There's something magical about a good conversation. You start off talking about the weather and you can end up solving all the world's problems and unravelling mysteries in life.
Mysteries of life are all there,
go deep and deep, yeah. And also, it's as you say, the connection between two people.
Yeah, you walk away thinking afresh, don't you, very often?
Definitely.
I like the fact that we find the meaning of things, not just through what's going on in our own heads, but the stuff that's fed into our heads in those conversations with other people. And then when it's with the right when you've got the right person, the right chat going, those moments are like gold.
Yeah, they are. And those interactions and conversations, they can be comforting. They can be uplifting, and if it's someone who challenges you or makes you think in a new way that you hadn't before, that's really the joy of conversation, I think. They're the ones that really stick with us, I think. They're the ones that, I suppose, they push us outside of our comfort zone, but in a good way.
Yeah, actually, that's funny. You should say that, because sometimes it's almost the smallest remark, the throwaway line, that just makes you stop for a moment and say, hang on a minute, that just changed the way I look at things. That's just changed the way I look at the world. Honestly, if people couldn't change, what would we even be doing here, But the fact that other people can say in a line, maybe something from their lives or some insight that just hits you and makes you think again about things that you took for granted. I think that's the great thing. To be open to the unexpected in a conversation.
Absolutely.
It's a great gift.
It really is. And, it also, I think, increases our empathy with other people because, we can relate to them, we can see what they're going through, they can open our minds to different ways. And I have to say now, in fairness, here in Allenwood today, we are in for one of those conversations because our guest is a woman who's never shied away from asking the big questions and from giving some pretty exciting and bold answers too, isn't that right?
Yeah, one of those people
well.
as one of those people who has said things that have stopped people in their tracks and made them think again.
There you go.
And of course, our guest today is Katherine Zappone, groundbreaking figure in Irish politics, a very passionate advocate for equality, for social justice. As Ireland's former Minister for Children and Youth Affairs, she played an absolutely pivotal role in advancing policies that improved the lives of so many young people, so many families. And of course, we all know Katherine as the first person, really the first openly gay member of the Irish cabinet, championing marriage equality and human rights, taking it all the way to our Supreme Court and having to suffer the disappointment of that, but then not giving up, keeping on. And we're just thrilled to have you here with us, Katherine, to be able to dive with you into this remarkable career, the lessons that you're going to teach us, the lessons you learned along the way, the things that you're going to say, they're going to stop people hopefully in their tracks. And think again. Tell us where you're at the moment, because the last time any of us heard about you, you were moving back to America, and now you've moved back to Ireland.
Indeed, and so I'm home, and I'm so delighted to be home. I obviously grew up in the United States, Seattle, and that was an extraordinary experience. Through lots of different reasons and people, I ended up in Ireland. Which I can talk about as well, and spent the probably almost 40 years here actually. When I had the opportunity to meet this extraordinary Irish woman in Boston College, it was 1981, and she had come from Dublin to take up a doctorate in theology and also in education, and I had done the same, coming from New York at the time, and met her, and her name was Anne Louise Gilligan, and really probably in about 10 days or so fell in love. And the rest is that history of 40 years, but some of which happened, early on when we finished a lot of our study, and she said, okay, and we hadn't actually finished our theses, but she said, now, won't you come to Ireland, for the next couple of years? And I said, well, yes, but I think that we'll probably be coming back to settle in America. And she said, well, she didn't actually answer the question, Mary. But I had a feeling that we probably would get back there. So I said, okay, I'll come with you, because she had a job. What you called at the time a permanent pensionable job in St. Pat's in Drumcondra, and she had a little house, and I didn't have either. So I thought it wouldn't be that much of a risk following her, and we'd be going back to the States, but that it just didn't happen. So that's when I came in the early 80s. Lived here really up until the 3 years ago, and again, when for lots of different reasons, just decided to go back home for a period of time. It was
Did
probably
grief bring you back home,
it sure did. I'll tell you, grief. At the loss of Anne Louise, who was the love of my life, who was. Also was my fellow, I suppose, change maker. Everything. What was wonderful is that because we were somewhat in the same profession, we did so many things together professionally, as well as living together as partners. But she passed away in June of 2017, and I had also. Spent a couple of more years in the ministry with such great friends and so much great support from my family as well. My family here in Ireland, I have a family here who is Anne Louise's family. I mean, I've watched them grow up, and her sister's children. But when I lost my seat and finished my job after a few years of Anne Louise's passing as well, I just felt it was time to take some time out and to reflect, go back to my other original home.
And 3 years later, you've decided to return. What was the impetus for that, Katherine?
Well, again, so many things, Mary, but it was largely the draw of Ireland. And it was because I think when I came that first time, and obviously, you know, in youth and in love and all of that, I did actually feel then as if I were, like I was coming home. I mean, my mother's people are from Virginia, County Cavan.
Okay.
My great-grandmother, who I'm named after, traveled, you know, took that boat and went to New York, ended up in New Jersey. And although we didn't hear that many stories about her, but my mother would use expressions, her mother would use expressions that when I got to this country, I was like, oh, I know what that means. You know?
Your dad's background is Italian, but they're both Catholic. Your mom and dad.
That's right, exactly.
Irish Catholic, Italian Catholic.
That's right. And I guess describing there, though, why, I think that was part of why I felt that Ireland was my home, but I was so welcomed that time when I first came. And in terms of some of the things that I took up to do professionally, I was asked to teach some courses in Trinity College. That was my first job. Some unusual. The professor at the time was looking around for somebody to teach feminist theology, Mary, in 1980 and 1982.
That seems quite remarkable.
Yeah, it does really. When you think that when you were growing up in the States in Seattle.
In Seattle,
after
that's
you
right.
moved there.
Yeah.
You were very, very Catholic, obviously growing up in a Catholic home, but is it true that you were actually in love with Jesus?
I say more. No, I never was in love with Jesus, but I certainly felt in love with God and in love with the divine, you know, and a deep attraction. And I understood that to be my spirituality at the time. But of equal importance, and again, I was just remembering this, is that, again, during those years, that, again, even when I was a little bit younger, it was the time of Pope John the 23rd. You know, who had this extraordinary, and of course my colleague and friend here, theologian Mary McAleese, extraordinary openness, opening the church to this, as we called it, the secular world, looking to some kind of interaction and conversation, and indeed us believing that perhaps those conversations, those different views, would actually influence the way we understood the sacred texts, the way that we interpreted who God was. And so I, you know, had lots of hope about that then, and at the same time, it was kind of like the two Johns. John F. Kennedy, you know, was made president. I'm from a strongly Democratic household. He gave this incredible speech, you know, when he started out, that the torch is passed to a new generation, and I was part of that generation.
And you were 10 around that time.
That's right, I was. So I felt that.
Feeling that.
And again, that openness, the freedom, the potentiality of that. Ladies, though, my women friends, at the same time, though, feeling that there was a part of me that was closing and becoming silent, and that was my sexuality. I did know at the time that I was attracted to girls. I did not know what that meant. I knew I better be quiet about that. Yeah, I was really scared. Exactly.
Did you know of the bias that was out there? Could you feel the bias? Did you hear the bias? How did you intuit it?
I felt it probably more than anything else. Exactly. I just knew that was not. I mean, my best friend was across the street, and probably, you know, I wouldn't have used the language then, but there wasn't definitely a deep attraction there. And so and her name was Kay, as I grew up as Kay as well. And I go over across the street, and it was just heaven being there with her. So it was only later on in my life, reflecting back, that I say, well, that was my first awareness of a deep attraction to a female.
And how did that sit then with your religious fervour? In daily mass?
Yeah. It was daily mass.
I know. My God, that's commitment, Katherine.
But again, it was a heart connection I felt, Mary. I really did. And so that's why I kind of later on in life thinking there was that kind of a spirited sense. You know, some of my friends, and indeed, you know, a woman who came to be really who we considered to be life companions, she was also studying theology. We didn't part until 10 years later, but it was so clandestine that indeed in the middle of that relationship, I probably explored not too many relationships with men, but a couple. You know, and then just came back and said no. So it was...
That's a weight, though, isn't it?
It was a real weight. But now that I'm even speaking about it, thinking, that's amazing to kind of be out there in terms of, you know, some key big issues and be so inside in relation to my sexual identity.
Did you find more liberation then when you came to Ireland and lived with Anne Louise?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, you know, We had, of course, a group of close friends who knew about our relationship. Very, very small group of friends. And indeed, most of them, frankly, were into kind of the more freedom-oriented or liberation understandings of religion.
Okay, yeah.
Interestingly enough, the people who we gathered around us did perceive us as a couple.
Yeah.
Although we didn't share explicitly with them our relationship, but they certainly perceived us as a couple. And in that sense, then, yes, it was extraordinary and marvelous, and we were going to live together and do our work out of that incredible love that we shared with one another. That really, I suppose, was the motivation for everything that we did.
So I think the first time I met you was in Uncusson.
It was, and in fact, I came across a picture of that recently.
I thought that was the most magnificent thing ever. I mean, in this house, in the middle of a housing estate, here were these two women with PhDs from Boston College who were dedicating their lives to giving of absolutely in the most unselfish way to women who never had a chance in life, who had no education, who had no hope, no confidence, who were bogged down, whether with family, with messy relationships.
Thank you.
That was the two of you.
Well, thank you. And I think, one of the, obviously, and I think you met that too, another key dimension of that is that these women and some men were extraordinary as well, and they wanted something different for themselves.
Also, the kind of the self-esteem that you gave them, by recognizing their potential and their value as people, because a lot of these, I presume, would have been from, rehoused in the Tala area.
That's
and
right.
Therefore,
yes, exactly.
And without the infrastructure and without because I'm from Clondalkin, so I can remember all of those houses being built in Tala without any notion of providing for the community.
No, absolutely. And indeed, the only, I suppose, community facility in the West Tala area, which is where we focused on first, were the churches and a couple pubs, But what you would know from then your own background is that as soon as we started inviting the women into our home, having the first courses and conversations when we were up in Britis before we built on Kassan 10 years later, you're having those conversations and they're ready to go. As I said, just a little bit of opening and taking the leadership. And it was because of their leadership, ultimately. I mean, remember the day when we wanted to build the facility in the community, we weren't getting enough government money, and they decided that they were going to go march on the Dáil and bring their tents and stay there until they got the money, but first we were going to have this community graduation in the community facility hall in Jobestown. And so as we were having that, we'd let people know that we're ready to go, or they'd let people know where they were ready to go. And in comes one of the government ministers and says, "We're going to give you the money."
And Kassan started in your kitchen.
But it did start in our.
It started in your kitchen.
It did. We had 10 years of courses up there,
and without a lot of money, without any money, with very little support. Can you tell us now about what Uncusson is doing today?
Yes,
isn't it extraordinary?
It is extraordinary. So it's about 38 years down the road, and two things I would say. Lots of things, but one is an approach to education and learning for adults, which has to do with, again, a dialogical approach. Let the people say what it is that they want to know and to learn. And secondly, a holistic approach, provide additional supports and services, whether it's counseling or childcare or whatever, so that the path is a bit easier. So that's the first thing, was an approach to education, which we named community education. And the second thing is, I think, but now in the last, I'd say probably 10 years particularly, it's grown from, a pretty successful organization in the community of Tala, West Tala, and become a national organization. Because it's connected through, obviously, virtually, other centers of community organizations throughout the country, and offers their approach, their way of doing things, and indeed their access to credentials and degrees.
You changed how education is delivered in this country, and you changed lives. You changed lives.
Yeah. Well, Thank you for saying that, Mary. When I was campaigning to get my seat in the Dáil, it was extraordinary to go to some of the houses and they would say, "Oh yeah, my ma'am was up in the shanty."
Oh wow, the shanty was
so
first,
it was
wasn't
lovely
it?
to meet people again, and yes, their lives were changed, but I can't emphasize enough, and it really is true how much our own lives were changed in that process. What we wanted to bring back into the more what we called then the more formal third level settings. So Anne Louise bringing that back into her teaching of the primary teachers and saying, you need to know how to teach in situations and communities where there is social and economic disadvantage. And that's when she set up the Educational Disadvantage Center, which is still putting out incredible research and encouraging. Now it's mainstream that the young people in DCU and in St. Pat's, which is now part of DCU, learn those things. And I brought what I learned into the classroom in Trinity and said, we need to think about, what it means to do the right and the good thing and what God might look like by listening to the views and the experiences of people you probably will never have the opportunity.
What was your approach when you were in Trinity? Because you did change the way in which theology was experienced.
Well, I think for some of my students, I do. We were both taught by the great Brazilian educators, Paulo and Elsa Freire. And as I said, he would often go into a classroom in Boston College and stand at the podium and wait, not say anything. Until the first question emerged. And then he would respond to what it is that they wanted to know. Anne Louise used to do that. I wasn't quite as brave as she was, but what I did do is I would maybe, teach a little bit of whatever it was that we were looking at, let's say some form of ethics, and say, now I'm going to tell you what a lot of the experts say, but then we're going to stop and I want you to ask the questions, and I want to hear what your answers are to your own questions, and I would take notes, and we were off. It was really a great experience that way.
It's funny, everything you have done, like the things we've talked about so far, and other campaigns that you have fronted, you always seem to be motivated, and Anne Louise obviously also by educational and also justice, social change and justice.
Yes, those
they have always been
well spotted. So education, always what it is, as you said, what we wanted to do, what we studied, and how we wanted maybe to find ways to change this, as Mary said, change the system of education. The first creches in Jobstown were for the women who were coming up to us in the shanty, from the earliest of years up and through, to the lifelong learning. So, but the passion for that education was because it was we really believed that it was through education that you could transform, not just transform, but eradicate poverty. Yeah. Bringing together that concern around poverty with education, justice was integral.
It's a wonderful way to live your life. You actually mentioned earlier, Katherine, that you were impressed and influenced by growing up when JFK was around the place. Martin Luther King would have been around at the same time as well. Was he? Does he have an impact on your consciousness?
Later on is what I would say. I suppose my focus was was more women and feminism, and my goodness, but later on, of course he was a preacher too. So bringing those two things together, a traditional form of religion, along with liberation and justice.
What a way to have lived your life.
Yeah, well, it was an extraordinary opportunity, very exciting. We felt so nourished by it, and then of course, one day we're planning a big trip to Chile to see some of our friends who were living there, and we thought we better get our affairs in order, and we went to our lawyer. We had bought a small ramshackled cottage in Kerry as my pension, because I wasn't making any pensions at the time, and that's when our Phil O'Hare looked over at us and she said, you're gonna have to pay a lot of money when one of you dies for the tax on that second home, because you're not married and you can't get married. And that literally brought us into a consciousness about the greater depth of our discrimination in relation to our life partnership.
The decision to get married.
Yeah, well,
because it wasn't all about property and money.
No, it wasn't. But Mary, to be honest, again, it's a long story. I mean, you were talking about conversation earlier there and the importance of conversation, and I was thinking, that's so Irish. Irish. Yeah. So beautiful the way that you learn and appreciate conversation. And I would often say, will I tell you the Irish version of the story? Or do you want to tell me a little bit? Because, and the reason I had 3 rituals in relation to our life partnership. The first one was in Boston, or actually we were living in Rockport, Massachusetts, and we gathered together a small group of people and said and declared our life partnership to one another. And we said we were vowing life partnership, and I swear to God, and so that was 1981, that nobody would use that language then. We made it up. Yeah. Because, of course, Anne Louise was fantastic at imagination. It was her the way what she studied as well. And then we wanted to, fast forward to where we are now. I was talking about going off and realizing we needed to we wanted to have our partnership recognized in law. Mm-hmm. That was what we wanted. In the beginning, I think we would have settled probably for some form of civil partnership and looked around, could we do it in any other European country? And we couldn't because we weren't a resident or a citizen. And then so we said, well, okay, we'll do it the way we'll look for marriage. Mm-hmm. Of course, why not marriage in the way that they did it in the United States and other countries for that freedom, try to get a marriage.
And recognition.
Yes, absolutely. Recognition, yes. And to try to get a marriage license, and then they say no, and then you take that to court. But in the process of planning that legal strategy, British Columbia opens its gates to non-residents. That's right. Yes. Who wanted to get married. And so within 2 months we were over there. And indeed, my family was still in Seattle, and so they came up from Seattle to Vancouver, British Columbia, and we had this most magnificent wedding.
And were they were on board?
They were on board.
Were they? That's lovely.
They were on board, absolutely.
It wouldn't always be the case.
It took my mother a little bit longer than the dad, but my father only wanted me to explain why it was okay theologically and ethically. And so I managed to do that.
And you were the expert.
My mother was still a little concerned about the neighbors, but then so proud. So they were
that's mommy's for you.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, of course, we did have a magnificent celebration in Dublin City Hall.
Oh, yeah.
After the vote of the people here to bring
Tell
our marriage home.
No, just tell me though, first of all,
campaign.
Were you terribly broken by the decision here of the courts not to recognise your marriage?
To be honest.
Or were you prepared for disappointment?
We were prepared for a loss, but it was devastating. Nevertheless. And I remember we went out to RTE. I said, wait a minute, let's just pause. I can't go out immediately, and just pulled ourselves together. And it was Mary Wilson. Mm-hmm. And I can still remember, some of the things she was asking, and she was so and I just said, look at, I probably spoke more than Anne Louise then to say that, I just really want to say that, people, if you're listening, and you have a daughter or a son, and they want to get married, and they're gay or lesbian, they can't do that. No. Yeah. Imagine how that feels.
Yeah.
That's how that
we were
feels.
devastated.
You were broken.
And angry, I'd say,
but
as well.
Very angry.
Very angry.
But then you had that great day. Sometimes the anger channeled.
Of course.
Then you had that. Tell us about that great day.
Can I say too, though, one of the things I learned, I'm coming to that, one of the things I learned is if you really want to bring about deep change, it takes a long time.
Oh, yes. Nothing happens overnight.
Damn. But, so exactly. So, of course, it went from the courts to the people, which was absolutely fantastic.
How long, many years was that? What year was that you were turned down?
We lost in 2003.
Oh, wow. 2003.
And that's when we started, along with all of our other great friends and leaders.
It was 12 years later before we have the referendum.
Yes. We set up Marriage Equality Organization, and then that last year, Marriage Equality came together with Glenn and the ICCL, so 2 other national organizations, and went for, yes, equality. But it took us those 8 or 9 years to get to the point where the government said, well, maybe we should look at this, and that's again where the first time they had a citizens' assembly. And I don't think they were kicking for touch by putting it in. They really wanted to hear what did people think.
Well, if they were, it didn't work.
And as you in the judgment, which is several pages that where we lost, she said effectively, Elizabeth Dunn said that, it doesn't seem as if the people really want this right now.
Oh. Got that wrong. Or maybe that was true then, but it wasn't true a generation later.
In 2003, maybe, if you're arguing that the context has changed, I haven't heard a lot about that. So that's, we all went off. And so by then, yes,
the winds of
people
change
wanted it,
the
people
narrative
voted for it.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And it was just, and indeed, we're coming up to the 10th anniversary next year. Can you believe that?
That is impossible
Remember
to
the
believe.
day for us, Catherine. It was a beautiful Dublin Castle, a clear blue sky.
Yeah.
And then the results.
It was a clear blue sky, and most miraculously, a rainbow.
A rainbow in the sky. We were travelling from Roscommon up for the celebration, having voted the day before, and there was a rainbow all the way up.
Yes.
It was
incredible. And I have to say, to give Simon Harris his due, he was the minister for the OPW, in charge of the OPW, and he knew it looked like we were we were winning, we were going to win, and he said, Let's let them come. Let's open the courtyard for the people, because that hadn't happened before either. So Simon Harris said, "Let's do that," and they put up the big, stage and all that, and prepared for it. But you still, you just would not be prepared at all for the feeling to enter the courtyard. Now, after we had all been at the different count centres, Anne Louise and I were out in Dublin Southwest, Grania Healy, Brian Sheehan, Denise Charlton, and a lot of the others were out in Simmons.
over the RDS. The RDS.
Yes, exactly, the RDS. We were in City West. And, so we all came together there to the castle, and there was so much love and joy,
absolutely,
grace,
and flags and grace.
Absolutely, yeah.
I described it as the most grace-filled day I've ever experienced anywhere in my life.
And when I then took the opportunity to ask Anne Louise, "Would you marry me?"
That's right. Oh, you stole the show.
I could do that then in Ireland. Literally that was beamed throughout the world.
I know. I remember that. Was she expecting that?
No, actually.
Did you see her face? No.
It was gorgeous.
I might have whispered to her when just before we got down there. But
that was gorgeous.
May I say too that I was the one who initiated the. Man, Louise, we got to do this, but I think it's because it was part of my American origins, and she was and also I'm more of an extrovert and she's introverted, but she said yes. But there was a moment just before we went to court for the first time to get permission to take the case, where I just got terrified at the breakfast table. I said, "I don't think I can do this, Anne Louise." She looked over at me. She says, "Yes, you can."
We're in this now.
She found her inner American.
Anyhow, but amazing, all the people who walked with us into that courtyard.
That was superb, though.
Oh my goodness,
it was amazing. Yeah.
It was a measure, really, of what conversations can do.
But to have those conversations around the table or at the doorstep, and it wasn't always easy at the doorstep, as you know.
Of course, yeah.
And sometimes people were, were criticized and offended, especially the young men were, and they took it, receiving the criticism. There was some strong language being thrown at them, and Anne Louise would put her arms around them afterwards, and we'd keep going.
How did you feel when the Pope described recently, twice in private so-called conversations, used the faggot word?
Yeah.
Isn't that... How did you feel about that?
To be honest, it still hurts. Even though I'm not a Pope watcher anymore, it still hurts because he's a leader, one of the leaders of the world.
Exactly.
It does get in a little bit, and then deeply disappointing. And that there's still work to be done, as you know so well.
Listening to you, Catherine, talk about the campaigning and the victory, and also the relationship that you had with Anne Louise. It's just so loving, and it's love that comes through all the time. So the following 2 years must have been very difficult, because it was only 2 years later, in 2017, that Anne Louise died. That must have been awful for both of you.
Yes, it was awful. And it was for both of us. Yeah, exactly. Actually, she got sick the first time in 2011 or 12. Yeah, but she recovered, and then but then she had that really terrible second brain hemorrhage in 2017, and I think it's because, part of it was the feeling that, God, why was our time so short after such amazing victories,
Yes, that's what struck me.
And that's why, to be honest, Mary, and again, you've had some deep experience of grief yourselves. You don't realize really what it does to your head, the deep grief. I really didn't, I think, kind of come to a point where I felt fairly, if you want to use the word recovered, or that the grief wasn't influencing my way of judging things until probably, 2 or 3 years ago, and she's been past 7 years, exactly. So it was, having said that, and I was still minister, actually, I didn't realize, and I'm going to say, I started writing about this. I've done some writing, come to that in a moment again. But what I didn't realize until I actually started writing about my political journey, that actually Anne Louise passed away, at the end of my first year in ministry. I thought she was with me longer than that, because not that she wasn't still with me, but and I managed to move through that because of the great support of friends and colleagues and civil servants, etc. But it was devastating, and I don't think I carry that grief anymore in the same way. Mm-hmm. What I do carry, as I said again, is that who she is, and in right here in my heart, and every day I miss her. And what I also find amazing is that I've started to kind of observe myself, that I picked up some of her behavioral patterns. Which all did that good. Well, she didn't have any bad ones. Which are with a beautiful way of relating and talking to people, and also her way with children. Like I was a little scared of children when I was young. She adored them. And I just watched her with them.
She had such softness.
Oh my God,
exactly.
Yeah. And yet a fierce, warrior as well, but she had incredible softness too. And so I'm, so proud, like today DCU has honored her with a lecture theatre.
The titanium spirit, the soft heart.
Lecture theatre and all that, exactly.
Well, the legacy that you both as a couple and also as a group have left. And you've shown such love. Yes. And also the difference you've made to people's lives.
Yeah. Katherine, you found someone new in your life.
I did.
Which you never expected, because I know that you never expected it. And when it happened, you didn't want to believe that it was even possible.
No. Jennifer?
Changing Times, the Allenwood Conversations.
Sponsored by the Meadowlands Hotel in Tralee.
Hi, it's Eugenio Derbez. Did you know that with Boost Mobile, you can cut your phone bill in half this tax season? Yes, half. Buy 6 months of service and get 6 months free. That's a full year of service paying half. That sounds good, doesn't it? And all on the Boost network with 99% nationwide coverage. Don't wait. Visit your Boost store today.
Requires upfront payment, taxes, and fees extra. Terms and exclusions apply. Visit boostmobile.com for full terms.
Picture this, you're halfway through a DIY car fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realise you're missing a part. It's okay, because you know whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything, brakes, headlights, cold air intakes, whatever you need, and it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need at prices you'll love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love.
Jennifer, really through a mutual friend in New York, after being there for about a number of months. Who's just extraordinary, beautiful woman. And one of the things that I love so much about her too is how much she loves Anne Louise being in my life.
Yes, she accepts that completely.
That's right, exactly. Yeah.
Also Ireland in your life, because you brought her back
and
here
Ireland,
now.
actually, exactly. Like we said, well, we were both ready to leave New York, and that goes back to your earlier question, and I just felt like it was time to come home. This is where I'm most able to be myself. And it was she who finally said, well, why don't we go there? And really? and got herself a job before we even got here, and so has been, living happily.
Is she settled?
Yes.
Good.
Originally from South Africa, family in Canterbury, so she was. Which was great too. So thank you, Mary.
Wonderful.
No, absolutely.
I'm going to because when you came into politics. You've talked about you're almost more Irish now than you've spent more of your life in Ireland than anywhere else.
Absolutely.
So and you've made a huge contribution to what Ireland is today.
Thank you.
But did you feel like an outsider when you became a government minister, when you got involved in politics?
Yeah.
Did you feel like an outsider?
What I felt was that that I was an outsider inside. That's what I felt like. Oh. And, and I had to then change my way of understanding what I could say and do, certainly even publicly, in order to keep pushing for the change. But I had, some different groupings or targets of people that I could relate to that would influence the change. For example, my other cabinet ministers, and I think particularly that was the case in the repeal movement, and how we all were really, and especially under Leo's leadership, that they were willing to listen at the cabinet table to different perspectives, and that made such a difference. So, what I did was I tried to also maximize the fact that I had been outside the inside power, and bring the people I knew and friends knew inside and help me continue to either write the laws, amend the laws, form the policies. And that's why I really believe that, as we continue to move into the future, that relationship between members of civil society and the state has to be more equal and strong and respectful. And sometimes, it's not that way.
You're back.
I'm back. Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, but it was.
Can we talk about what the pandemic was like? Because that was a very difficult time, and you had lost your life partner. How did you live the pandemic, Katherine?
It came actually as after I had lost my seat, but I was still minister. And I was actually in New York as minister. At the time, I had been appointed a special envoy to advocate for our seat on the Security Council of the United Nations. And I was there doing that work, and all of a sudden, New York started to close. Yeah. And I was with our ambassador there, Geraldine Byrne-Nason. And I remember one night she had organized this amazing, like the first night out of, the 25th anniversary of Riverdance, and invited a lot of the ambassadors to kind of showcase Ireland to help, move towards perhaps winning the seat. And it was a half-empty theater. Wow. And then 2 days later, we were in the United Nations building. We had one last panel, and actually Hillary Clinton spoke at it, but everybody else was just leaving. And I just remember heading towards the door, looking up, and there's Antonio Guterres and nobody else, and Geraldine and I, and we just said goodbye, and that was it. They closed the door after that. So, and I headed back to Ireland. I went to a cafe, and there was only one other person in the cafe, and he was the pilot. And it was only himself and myself on the way home. It was an extraordinary experience and I was in post until June of that year because a new government was forming. It took some time. It was the pandemic. But it was an extraordinary experience to be part of a group making decisions about what to do in terms of protecting our people in relation to COVID and the restrictions that we needed to put in place so that people would not die. We would get our, the essential services delivered. We would find ways to keep people attached to employment so that when, please God, we opened again, we could get moving. Then a new government was formed. I finished my job, and I said, okay, now is the time. That chapter is ending, another one is opening, and that's when I decided to go back to the States.
And was that very difficult? Because for somebody who has served so hard and worked so hard, to lose your seat, Katherine, like on a human level, that's...
Yeah, exactly. It was hard. I think, but coming in the, after the loss of Anne Louise, so it was difficult, absolutely. But so I went home, spent some time with my family, settled in New York, got to be part of the Biden-Harris campaign, and Mary, our friend here, did a wonderful event with me to try to get out the vote, especially the LGBTQ vote, encourage them, anybody who has a vote here. So all of that was great, and then of course. In the process of that, period, in that early first year, I got a call from Simon Coveney to say maybe they, thinking about the possibility of another role for me, and I thought, wow, amazing, because I think through our conversation, I always was committed to public service. That's what I wanted to do, especially international public service. And what I expect, several months later, what I expected, to be a routine cabinet decision became a summer-long saga that was extremely personally difficult.
What fed that, do you think?
Well, it's hard to tell from the distance. I mean, I was in New York, but I think, Mary, a lot of it, the world was different then. Ireland was different because of the pandemic. I think that was a lot of it. I'm not saying it was all of that, but it was just, we're just kind of living outside of time in that incredible context of how hard it was. Everything was so hard.
But you must have been hurt by it.
It was very difficult. It was very, very difficult.
I mean, the offer was made in good faith. You accepted in good faith. You had a track record. You were in the UN. You were working in New York. It seemed like a very sensible and not particularly expensive thing that would be of value to Ireland. No. Yes.
Well, I guess that's the way I would have perceived it.
But what gets these posses up,
You would maybe be able to answer that better than I wasn't here.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that, again, just going back to what, referring earlier to doing some writing has always been a really healing process for me. And so part of the writing then, I started to write about that, and eventually came to a deeper understanding of the context that I'm talking about, as well as a deeper understanding of myself. That's part of, a larger piece of writing about the political period of about 10 years, and Anne Louise being so central to that. And I am delighted to say that the book has been bought. The book has been bought.
Great. So when will we see it?
I still have to negotiate a few things, but so that's really, and it will be coming out next year. I don't know exactly when, but I will be letting. Thank you. So I'm absolutely thrilled about that.
I was reading that this is the first media that you have done since you came home.
I haven't done any media since I've come home. So I'm delighted
it's lovely to be sharing this information about the publication of your book.
Yes, thank you. Exactly.
And how's it been for you? the first media. The book, I'm sure, is
with two extraordinary women and change makers, you mean? Wonderful.
But you're right when you say, the world has changed. America has changed. Europe is changing. Our Middle East, can we even bear to talk about it? As you look at those changes, are you worried about things like the social media, like AI, those things that are kind of a subtext that's always going on in the background? Yes. And we're not, I belong to the generation that's looking at this and saying, where's all this going?
I'm terribly worried about social media. I basically took myself off of it. I didn't personally engage. I haven't personally engaged in social media for several years now, even in the middle of my ministry, because of, it was getting abusive. And it not as much as, my goodness, look at the way it's impacted politics today.
It's a mean space.
It's terrible.
It's mean.
I would still be with LinkedIn. I think that's an interesting space. It still feels safe enough. But yes, terrible things are happening there. And so especially for our children. And I don't think, we have fully moved into a space where we're getting a handle on that and are ahead of the curve. We have commissioned them on. They are doing very good work. They are, putting together a code. We do have other, I think, initiatives, especially in relation to online safety for children, the EU Digital Services Act. So now we're into the policy speak a little bit. So there is some framework that's starting to be developed to try to provide a way of monitoring and also holding to account the social media platforms. But it's going to be a long time, I think, before we get to that place, and many children especially will be harmed until that point. And so I would have quite a passion in relation to working on those issues with others who are already in that place.
What I'm amazed at, I have a couple of grandchildren, 8 and 11, and the 8-year-old saying, I was asking him what he was watching, and he said, "Oh, I'm watching a program on YouTube, but Nana, it is appropriate." So,
wow,
at 8, I wouldn't have known. Appropriate. I mean, if they were a television program, a radio program, if they were a newspaper, they're not a platform; they're a publisher, and publishers are held to account. At least, at least we have the laws of defamation.
Yes,
they are held to account. But the social media platform has avoided that responsibility. We've let so many horses bolt so far ahead. Pulling that back is going to be one very big job.
It is a very big job.
Isn't it?
No, so this is a key issue of our time.
It crept up on us
Would you advise anybody, I mean, anybody to take up a life in politics at the moment? Because it is...
Absolutely, I would.
I know. It's a parallel space.
But we have to... This is the whole
space.
Yeah, I know. And Mary, you probably know what I'm going to say, and you probably would say that too. But you cannot... We have to have... the people, the leaders, the commitment, the people, and you have to have a different kind of courage. They have to go into the public space.
Stand up.
They have to stand up, or we will go away from
people will
democracy.
Perish. You're right.
People will perish. Exactly.
Yeah. With all of the passion and the commitment that you have to really doing good work and working on behalf of people who might be a little bit more vulnerable, do you have time for downtime, for hobbies? Somebody told me that you were big into fast cars.
I was. In fact, exactly. And do you know why? Just going back to an earlier part of the conversation, when I would go across the street to see my friend Kay, there was a 280 SL Mercedes in the driveway. I swear to God, and I adored that. Now, of course, being American, that's partly why I'm into the cars. And it wasn't until I said, I'm going to get one of those one day. And I did manage to get one in Ireland. That was probably about 15 years ago. I didn't keep it for very long. But yes, that would have been a hobby. Actually, and coming out to this beautiful countryside of Kildare. I remember when we belonged to a Highfield golf course. I did take up golf for a number of years. I've only golfed recently after a decade of not golfing. But really I guess one of the hobbies primarily has been exercise, walking, and then I'm getting back to reading as well, Mary. But I'm finding a little more time now.
Because the fast cars thing was scaring me. You are giving me a lift home. So,
I did.
Down those
I got a lesson
I
got a lesson in driving there now recently. Exactly. So I'm still alive anyhow.
And just as we're conversing here, maybe I'm wrong, but it's just come into my head. When you and Anne Louise were living in Brutus, did you do a renovation on your house?
Oh, you're not wrong. No, it was a room to improve.
I do remember it.
Stuart Bannon is one of my great friends.
What a transformation.
It was a transformation.
Amazing.
Exactly, it was.
I'm remembering it now.
It was a beautiful into a beautiful home.
Must have been a killer to have to sell that.
It was... part of it, me felt that way, but it was time then. It was 2 years after Anne Louise had passed away, and I was ready to close that chapter. You have to really, you're going to keep going and not live in the past. You have to let things go and close certain things to move forward.
There's a question that we ask all of our guests, because the kind of the theme of the podcast is changing times. And is there any one thing that you would like to change now, either for yourself or for society? You've spoken about wonderful change and improvements.
I think I'm just going to go back to when, again, Anne Louise and I starting the shanty in Ankassan, we said education can eradicate poverty. So I would still be especially committed to children's poverty. And the great news is, everyone, is that it's not that many at one level. The scale of the poverty of children has gone down. You have to remember on the other side that one child poor is way too many, and I've met many of them, and the loss of the opportunities. I'm disturbed by some choices in the past budget, one of which was a missed opportunity to, I think, to take the right policy choice to do a big scale down of children's poverty. I won't go into the detail. Having the evidence provided to us by ESRI, the second time in a row, a government chose to do something else, and it's not that many resources either that we could actually eradicate children's poverty. But it's not just a matter of dropping money into a household. That's important. Again, as shown in Biden's administration, he reduced child poverty, significantly in his term. But it's also about allowing the access for a full, supported early years education for every child as well. And there's enough money to do it without the pilots. So that would be, I'd still be very passionate about that and think it's possible. I think it's really important, in the dream, to dream, as Anne Louise said, image the possible.
So as always, a very big thank you to our producer, Enda Grace, here at Dundara Television and Media in County Kildare.
Thank you also to our diligent researcher, Anne-Marie Staunton, and of course to our wonderful sponsor, the Meadowlands Hotel in Tralee.
Don't forget to subscribe, comment or rate Changing Times.
So until next time, from all of us here in Allenwood in County Kildare, thank you for listening. Agus Gadeshiv Slán.
Changing Times, the Allenwood Conversations.
Sponsored by the Meadowlands Hotel in Tralee.
This episode is sponsored by Boost Mobile.
It's James and Fuhad from Shits and Gigs podcast, and we're here to talk about Boost Mobile, the newest 5G network in the country.
With compelling deals for new lines, Boost Mobile makes it easy to switch today.
Boost Mobile's new network delivers customers the speed and service they'd expect from the big three, plus groundbreaking benefits you'd only get from a true challenger in the industry.
These include letting people try the network risk-free for 30 days and offering a $25 per month unlimited plan that's guaranteed to never go up in price. They have blazing fast 5G and plans for all the latest devices. Visit your nearest Boost Mobile store and find us online at boostmobile.com.
Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.